Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, anywhere in the world. I would really like to welcome you, our INSEAD community, alumni, staff, faculty, but also, of course, other friends of the INSEAD community. My name is Hilke Plassman. I've been a professor in INSEAD's marketing area since, I think, over 15 years now. And I do research in the intersection of psychology, economics, marketing, and cognitive neuroscience. And this is what today's webinar will be about. I'm super thrilled to have Michael Platt from the Wharton School joining us here that will talk about the leader's brain and how we can leverage knowledge from neuroscience to advance management thinking. Alrighty, I need to figure out. I don't see the option to advance the screen. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. A couple of rules before we get started. So you as an audience are muted with the video off. The chat box is disabled, but please use the Q&A tab to suggest questions for the speakers. And then we'll record the webinar and it will be shared later on in our YouTube channel. Great. So today we're going to talk about how we can leverage neuroscience to advance managerial decision-making, or the shorter, a bit more catchy title, The Leader's Brain. And for this, it's a great honor to have here as a guest a good friend and a co-author, Michael Platt, who is the director of the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative. And Michael, so he actually has affiliations in all these different fields that I mentioned earlier. So he's the SRIP University professor. He's affiliated with the marketing area in the Wharton School, but also in psychology, neuroscience, and the university, and psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And so Michael is an expert in the NASCEN field of decision neuroscience and neuroeconomics. He has won so many awards for this that it would take up half of the time here, I think, to mention all of them. A recent one was a Merit Award from the National Institute of Mental Health. And his work is very often featured in the press and television worldwide. He also, what is interesting is that he serves on the advisory board of a lot of startups in the biotech area and even founded his own company, Cockware, a neurotechnology startup. Now, this is kind of the official the official CV or bio from Michael. Can you advance the slide, please? This is when you now Google him. It's one of the most kind of fun pictures that show up, right? So because his specific expertise in this whole area of neuroeconomics and decision neuroscience is in what we call social neuroscience. So he has super exciting work with monkeys, and so either in the lab or even in the field. And he will talk about some of this today. So Michael, the floor is yours now.
Well, thank you, Hilke. It's really wonderful to be here. It's been a long time, and I'm really excited to share just a little bit of our insights and some of the work that we've been doing. So I founded the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative 6 or 7 years ago, and really the goal, which is very ambitious and comprehensive, is to take the technology, the analytics, and the insights from neuroscience and apply that to all kinds of business challenges. And that ranges from marketing and brand strategy, where the return on investment is very, very clear. We won't focus on that today. To management, where I think the impacts will be greatest, although this is in its earliest phases, as we'll see, and we can talk about that in the Q&A, to finance and entrepreneurship, leadership. So the whole range of all of the business challenges that you might think about, I think is fair domain, because if you consider it, in every aspect of business, there's a brain, right? There's at least one brain behind the activities that are going on in business. So this is a wide portfolio. We're going to focus today, in today's session, on social neuroscience, as Hilke said. And really what I'm going to try to do for you today is to give you enough neuroscience that's accessible and that can be implemented in a way to help you to be a better leader, to be a better manager. And even if you don't apply any of these principles at work, if you take them home, you'll be a better leader in your community, you'll be a better parent, you'll be a better spouse. This is all about building a culture of connection and trust and good communication. And really the key to begin with is what I call leading with the social brain in mind. And we'll see what that, I'm trying to get control of the slide. It says I'm controlling them, but there we go. So it's just moving a little slowly. So I just want you to consider this question as we start to move through, which is whether you build in time for socializing within your teams or with your clients, or build in time for the people you manage to actually socialize. And if you say no, I hope I can convert you to yes by the end of this session. Okay, so there are many, many, many observations. We can give you chapter and verse data, lots of papers to demonstrate that good relationships are critical in business. Here's just one amongst many, which is from Google's Oxygen project, which was actually done about 10 or 11 years ago. And basically, what they did was to ask Googlers, what makes for a good manager? And you get all this data back, and it turns out that good managers have good social skills. So they are good at communicating. They can take the perspective of employees. They've got their employees back, and they try to build trust and help them to move ahead. Of course, that's not always what you find in managers, especially in tech. Google implemented a training program, kind of like what we're talking about here, and it improved management across the board, and outcomes and productivity went up. If you look at more recent data, this is from Microsoft's work program, which was this was right in the middle of the pandemic, really, and it was looking at companies' fortunes against the S&P 500, and those companies that have employees who report being more engaged, more connected to the company, actually perform much better, and in fact better than the S&P 500. So if all you care about is the bottom line, this investment in creating a culture of connection and trust and communication is really, really important and will deliver results. And I think we all can understand that managing our teams, being a leader, is often harder now because so much of our interaction, so much of our commerce, so much of the work that we do is online, which is wonderful in the sense of improving access. I'm able to talk to all of you. You're all over the world right now. You can Zoom into meetings at work, but I think we've all had the experience that this brings up its own challenges, right? And there's lots and lots of data here in the US showing that workers who are working completely remotely, especially young people, are actually incredibly lonely. They find it hard to get into the company culture, very hard to find mentors and have good mentorship. So there are lots and lots of challenges that we confront that aren't going away, since so much of work is now happening online. So many people are working remotely or in hybrid situations. So finding ways to connect is going to be critical for the future of business. But I want to point out that finding ways to connect is critical for well-being too. So we're in a crisis of well-being here in the US, but I think throughout the developed world. It is, we have skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and we know from really wonderful and really robust epidemiological data that people who have more friends or deeper friendships, so greater social support, live longer, healthier, happier lives, and they make more money for all the reasons that we just discussed before, the critical role of social skills in business. And the flip side is really, I'm astounded by this every day. This is something that I work on and I write about all the time. We now know that loneliness, which is the gap between the social connections you want to have and the ones that you do have, is one of the worst things that you can do for your own health. So loneliness is more dangerous than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, okay? It's more dangerous than being overweight and being inactive, than having diabetes. It just knocks years off of your life. So it's critical for us to build ways to, and to create ways and implement them to create stronger connections with the people that we work with and to give them the opportunity to connect with each other. And the reason that all of this is, that our social lives are so important to us, right? And we are really unique amongst animals in our dependence on each other and our ability to cooperate and work together. And perhaps not surprisingly then, and this is really a major discovery of social neuroscience in the last decade or so, we are all wired to connect. So each and every one of us has within our heads something we call the social brain network. These green blobs on these slices through the brain illustrate some of them. So this social brain network is a collection of brain areas that are connected to each other, and they're more or less dedicated and specialized to managing our moment-to-moment interactions with other people and also our long-term relationships with them. And this social brain network works by kind of taking the pixelated data that we get from our senses, assembling that data into images, okay, such as there's a person in front of me, and then increasingly sophisticated calculations are performed on that as it moves forward from back to front. And one stream of that social brain network, which runs a little lower, is tasked with kind of emotional processing and tries to figure out what the person we're interacting with might be feeling. And if our own feelings come to resonate with that person's, that can lead to empathy, as we'll see in a few moments. Then there's another stream that runs a little higher. It's more cognitive. And this processing stream is tasked with figuring out what another person's mental state is. Okay, so what are they thinking? What do they want? What are they paying attention to? What's important to them? Those two streams of information come together to shape the calculation of utility signals that drive the decisions that we make. So that's the social brain network. And remarkably, we now know, and this is true in many studies have demonstrated this, that people who have more friends, so more social connections in the world, actually have a bigger social brain network. And having a bigger social brain network basically means it can do its job better. There are more connections between the neurons. The wires that connect these different areas together are thicker, and so there's more information that can be processed. This is deeply baked into us because we've demonstrated, for example, the same thing is true in monkeys. Monkeys who have more friends live longer and have more babies. They're more successful. Monkeys who have more friends have a bigger social brain network as well. So this is deeply baked in. Now that raises a concern. Is this just destiny? Is this nature? Is it just due to what your parents gave you, right, in terms of what you were born with? And yes, of course, your genes contribute to the structure and function of your social brain network, but we now know that it's actually more glass half full than half open, that your social brain network is like a muscle. So the more that you exercise it, the more that it grows. This is a photo from the farmer's market in my neighborhood. It's just 2 blocks away. I go there on Saturdays and I just use every opportunity I have to talk to the guy who sells mushrooms. He comes here from a couple hours away. Talk to the Amish people who are selling flowers. When you go out on the weekend, talk to the barista, at your local coffee shop. Talk to the people you work with. Every time you do that, that's like getting on the treadmill to exercise your social brain. You're giving it a little bit of a workout and you're making it stronger, and it will work better in the future. So use it or lose it, and please work on your social brain network. Okay, so let's now imagine that you've got a high-functioning social brain network. You take advantage of the company socials. You go to the company picnic, barbecue. You're talking to your barista every day. Let's move into how we deploy our social brain networks in any interaction. And really, this is about how do you get the most out of a meeting, okay? And, it's kind of funny, but I often feel like I've done all of this work and all of this science, and I've spent all this time in the laboratory to kind of reinforce what my parents and my grandparents taught me, okay? And the key to all of our social interactions, the first step is paying attention to the person or the people that you're interacting with. Now, the reason is that we can only see clearly about the width of our thumb at arm's length, and everything else is a blur. So what we're paying attention to gets turned up in the brain, and what we're not paying attention to gets turned down. So, I don't know how many of you have been in this kind of situation. You're in a meeting, right? Whoops, that was supposed to anyway. You're in a meeting, and so you're meeting with people. It's maybe you're in a negotiation or something like that, and you've got your phone under the table, right? And you're checking your texts and you're checking your stocks or whatever, checking your messages. You might as well have a bag over your head because you cannot pay attention to, you are not aware of the fleeting facial expressions that are moving across people's faces over the course of just milliseconds. There are changes in posture, et cetera, et cetera. So you are starving your brain of useful social information in that situation. And when we are working online, it is that much harder Okay, so you now take real, live, three-dimensional human beings who, that's what our brains evolved to interact with, right? People in the real world. And now you take all that rich data and you squash it into 2 dimensions and put it in a little box on the screen. Okay, you're reducing the amount of information that your brain needs, that it's looking for to actually do its job. And if the lighting's bad, or if the camera's not good, if there's a lag in the video, if a person's wearing glasses, forget the possibility of even knowing whether their eyes are open or where they might be looking, right? This makes it very, very hard to navigate these social interactions. I mean, where do you look? And it gets even harder the more people that you have in the meeting, right? So if you have dozens of different boxes that are open, each person is squashed into a smaller box. And if you're looking, up at, Mama Brady up here in the top left, then you can't see what's going on with Papa Brady down here in the lower right. It's just impossible. So one little take-home message, you probably already discovered this, which is to limit the number of people that you have in an online meeting to only those who are most important, or perhaps go to speaker mode so that you can actually read facial expressions and facial cues, but you have to be a good moderator so you don't have people kind of hog the screen, if you will. And if there are people that, if you're meeting with people that you know really well and you've worked really well together in the past, maybe just go all audio. The video is just a distraction. Now, there are other features of our online work life that are also challenging. And one of the biggest ones is that the camera on your computer is completely, it's positioned to frustrate eye contact. So we need eye contact. When I make eye contact with any of you, that tells your brain that my brain thinks you're important. Our brains actually begin to synchronize, as I'll discuss in a little bit. And yet the camera is either up at the top of your screen, if you're using kind of a laptop or an Apple like I am, or if, sometimes you work with a tech person and they have their camera off to the side, so you're looking at their ear, which is a really uncomfortable experience. That's not how we're supposed to interact with each other. And there's really no solution. Now, there is a little bit of a hack here, a brain hack, if you will. You may have already discovered it, which is that if you were speaking to your team, right, if you're leading a group and there's something you need to communicate that they all need to hear, right, and they need to pay attention, what you do is you stare up at that green light, you stare up at the camera, and you talk to it. And it's going to feel terrible because your brain instinctively wants to look at everybody's reactions, but you stare at that light and everybody will feel as if they're bathed in your gaze, like they are the most important person in the world, and they're more likely to actually hear what you're saying. And if you can do that in a way so that everybody feels that, as we'll see later, they will be more likely to understand what you're saying in the way that you intend and more likely to act on it. Now, all of these challenges have led to the very, I think, universal experience of Zoom fatigue, right? Which is that our brains have to work so hard when we are interacting with people online. We don't know where to look. The information is degraded. You can't make eye contact. So it's super challenging. I don't know. I experience this all the time. And the real key to overcoming that Zoom fatigue, which is real, is to take breaks. And so, sorry, that was supposed to animate away. There we go. So this is from a study done by Microsoft's Work Lab as a pilot study, came out 2 years ago. And it's just a measure of how eager and happy and motivated your brain is to be engaged with the people that you are working with. And if you take breaks between meetings, just a 5 or 10 minute break, you see that the brain is nice and happy and motivated to be engaged with the other people there. And if you don't take a break, here in yellow, your brain is out the door. It wants to run away. It's unhappy. It's not engaged. It doesn't want to be there. We replicated this finding in a study we published last year, demonstrating that basically, if you take breaks, your brain can reset and engage at a deeper level with the people that you're working with. And if you don't, forget it. Now, you have the capability to build this in as a default in almost every calendaring software that's out there, but how many of us actually take advantage of that? Okay, so I suggest that you do that, make that the default, make that the default for yourself and for your teams, and you'll all be happier and more productive as a result. There we go. So let's now step from getting the most out of a meeting and getting the most out of an online meeting to these sort of deeper steps of engagement with other people. And what I want to focus on right now is empathy, the ability to feel and understand what another person might be feeling. And I don't know if you're a Star Trek Next Generation fan. I'm a Star Trek Every Generation fan. And there's this great character on Star Trek Next Gen named Deanna Troi, and she was this empath, and she helped out Captain Picard by being able to kind of get inside the heads of the aliens that they were encountering. What are they feeling? Which is helpful in understanding what they might do next, what they need, and what they might want. Now, in the business community, survey after survey after survey has shown that people want more empathy. 90% in this survey from 2021, 90% of employees, HR professionals, CEOs said empathy is important. Okay, it's really, really important. And yet it's hard. It's hard for leaders in particular to demonstrate empathy. So in this study, for example, almost 70% of CEOs say they feel they won't be respected if they show empathy in the workplace. It's hard to consistently demonstrate empathy in their working life. And as a result, only 1 in 4 employees in this study believed empathy was sufficient, okay? And so this is a big challenge for business leaders. How do we develop the ability to show up and to make people feel as if they are heard, right? That they really are heard, that they are seen, and that they're understood. And I think we can all appreciate that as our organizations get more diverse, right? As we have more different kinds of people than the people we might have grown up with, that this can be ever more challenging. So we've all, at least in the United States, been very aware of something called implicit bias or unconscious bias, which is very pernicious. It continues to frustrate efforts to build more inclusive organizations and societies. And this implicit bias, despite decades and decades of implicit bias or unconscious bias awareness training, has had basically no impact, okay? And in fact, it might be causing a reverse impact, a blowback on the advancement of individuals from underrepresented groups into the highest levels of business, at least here in the United States. And so what I'm going to show you right now is some very provocative work that was done by a former postdoctoral fellow of mine, Dr. Feng Sheng, who is now a faculty member. He was a Wharton Neuroscience postdoctoral fellow, and he's now on the faculty at Zhejiang University. So when he was doing his PhD, which he did half at Beijing University, Peking University, and half at Stanford, he was very interested in implicit bias, especially between Caucasians and ethnically Chinese people. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you 2 videos that he made and he used in his studies. Okay, and I just want you to watch the videos and experience them. And so here's one, here's the first one, and here's the second one. Okay, so I don't know if anybody felt pain or anguish or empathy for the women in these videos. I sure hope somebody did. I also want to point out, nobody was hurt. These are fake needles, they're blunt, they get pushed back into the syringe. But he created these videos and also versions where the women actually made painful expressions to unmask or uncover the difference between what people said they felt, and this is really key, and what their brains told us. And so, you know, this is a really stark example I'm going to show you of the power of neuroscience, because it can unveil brain processes that we are unaware of, that we might be afraid to express, that we can't really touch. You know, the 86 billion neurons in our brain, that chatter is very difficult for us, for our conscious verbal abilities to be able to express. Okay, so what he did was he wired up these women to measure brain neurophysiological responses, sometimes, not these women, sorry, participants, as well as putting them in brain scanners, MRI machines to measure blood flow in the brain to various parts of the social brain network while they watch these videos. Every single person, when asked, so to self-report what they felt, said, I feel pain for each of these 2 women equally. And the people in the study, the participants, were either ethnically Caucasian or ethnically Chinese, okay? So everybody said they felt pain equally. And if you didn't say that, you'd kind of be saying, you know, you're a racist or you're psychotic, right? Or a sociopath. Well, let's look at what the brain data said. So on the left, this is implicit bias or unconscious bias, alive and well and in the brain. On the left, we have the brains of Chinese observers. Whoops, sorry, I shouldn't have clicked that. Chinese observers watching this video, and you can see that when they see a person from their own ethnic group in blue pierced with a needle, apparently, you see this big brain empathy response. This is part of the social brain network that motivates what we do next. So the more brain empathy you have here, the higher the likelihood that you actually help somebody who's in pain or in need. So big brain empathy response for somebody from your own group, zero brain empathy response for somebody from a different ethnic group. If we look on the right in the brains of Caucasian observers, brain empathy response is huge for somebody from your own tribe, somebody from your own ethnic group, another Caucasian person, and basically no brain empathy for somebody from the other ethnic group. And you see this data, and this has been replicated for Black and white, Latino, you name it. And you just go, oh my God, what are we going to do? People say they feel empathy for someone from outside their ethnic group, but their brains tell us a different story. And the brain data is a better predictor of what people do next. This is unconscious bias. This is why, despite all of that training, right, all of those required HR trainings, it's having very little impact, right, on people's behavior, because at root, the default brain response is to be stronger for somebody who's from your tribe than somebody who's not. Wow. Okay, what do we do about this? Well, there is some hope, and the hope comes from studies in animals. Okay, so it doesn't, that implicit bias response doesn't mean that all people are evil. Some people are evil. Not all people, it doesn't mean everybody's racist. It certainly doesn't mean that. What it reflects is the way that our brains actually make sense of the world. And our brains are statistical pattern learning devices that learn who we are and the group to which we belong through the interactions we have with other people as we're growing up, okay? And this is not uniquely human. All brains seem to do this the same way. So it turns out that rats, okay, believe it or not, show empathy. A rat will work hard to help another rat who's trapped in a tube and can't get out, and it depends on the same part of the brain. If you actually turn off that part of the brain, which you can do in rats and mice, then the rat won't help any rat. Okay, they won't demonstrate any kind of empathy. But remarkably, who a rat helps depends on who they grew up with. So a white rat raised with white rats will help a white rat, but not a black rat. Think about that. A white rat raised with black rats will help a black rat, but not a white rat. A white rat raised with a mixed group of black and white rats helps everybody. Okay, so that is kind of a really beautiful result. And it endorses the fact that actually our brain empathy response is tuned to the interactions that we have while we're growing up. And what this means to me is that actually it suggests that diversity is more than just a goal. It's a goal because it improves team outcomes. It's a goal because it helps with representation. But diversity is also strategy, right? The more diverse we make our schools that our kids are growing up in, the more inclusive their brains will be as they grow up. The more diverse we make our companies, our universities, eventually, right? Because our brains are always learning, always adapting, they're plastic, eventually there will be more empathy. Now, this is great, fantastic, but I think you can appreciate that this is a slow process, right? We've been trying to implement diversity in this country in the school systems, public schools, since the 1960s, and we're still not there yet. It's gotten better, but we're not all the way there yet. So it's a slow process. Is there something we can do in return? Sorry, I just want to show you that, forgot about this. In the human study that I showed you earlier with the needle stick response, this is entirely consistent with what we see in rats. So brain empathy response in Chinese people increases linearly as they interact more and more with Caucasian people. Okay, the more you interact with people from the other tribe, the more open and inclusive your brain is, and the more brain empathy that you actually demonstrate, entirely consistent with the story that I've been telling you from rats. But that's a long-term process, right? So what can we do in the short term? And I think this is really, really important, what I'm going to tell you now, which is that if we have shared goals, if we have team spirit, this can actually boost empathy. And consider this, I'm a big sports fan. I love to go down to Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia on Sundays. I'm a big American football fan. And what you see is that people who are Black and white and Latino put on green jerseys And now they're willing and ready to fight people wearing purple jerseys or black jerseys or red jerseys, right? Because they're all on the same team now. This is a phenomenon that's been known in social psychology since, the 1960s. It's known as the minimal group effect. You can take people off the street, you assign them to the red team or the blue team. You're on the red team, you're on the blue team, you're on the red team, you're on the blue team. And in like 5 minutes, the people on the red team are saying, oh, I don't like the people on the blue team. They're dumb and they're ugly. So it's remarkable how fast we can form teams in opposition to other teams. So Fung, my former postdoc, knew that. And so what he did was to repeat the needle stick experiment, but he had the women in the videos either wearing red shirts or blue shirts. And then he assigned participants to red team or blue team. And when he did that, what he found is that if the woman in the video was from a different ethnic group, but she was on your team, then the brain empathy response was rescued. So this suggests that at least temporarily, dynamically, right, if we focus on shared goals, shared values, and this is something you can implement in your company, then we can create more inclusiveness and greater empathy. Think about the first, like at least in the US, the first organizations to really diversify were the military and sports teams. And what's one major obvious distinguishing aspect of military and sports teams? They wear uniforms. The uniform takes the focus off of the default, which is that people are different, and it puts it on the fact that we are all on the same team. We have shared goals, we have shared values, and we're going to work together. Okay, I'm going to now build on what we've talked about with regard to empathy and talk about perspective taking. And perspective taking is really a business superpower. It's the ability to see through the eyes of someone else, right? To understand their goals, their needs, their wants, desires, etc. And so to return to the movie analogies, another sci-fi genre, in this case, the X-Men from Marvel Studios. If you know Professor X, he had this capacity to be able to read the minds of other people. Wow, wouldn't it be amazing if you could read the minds of your customers or your clients or the people that you're leading and managing? Well, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can really do that. So this is a really, I think, fun example about perspective, and it's all about perspective. So the guy who's trapped on the desert island is excited because he sees a boat coming and thinks he's getting rescued. The guy in the boat, his perspective is, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rescued. There's land, right? It's all about your perspective. And perspective taking is really interesting. It depends on the social brain. It doesn't emerge in development in children until they're 4, 5, 6 years of age. Perspective taking is impaired in disorders like autism, in which those individuals kind of fail to take perspective and understand what their actions, the impact of their actions on other people. It becomes a challenge for them in terms of work, also in terms of society. So I'm going to ask you this question to think about again as we go through this, which was that when was the last time you really intentionally took time to see something from someone else's perspective? How often do you really do that? Okay. I know for myself, I don't. And if I ask my wife, she'll tell me all the time, why can't you see it through, from my perspective? And so it's a constant reminder. And to give you a sense of like how powerful perspective taking is, how it can really change how your brain processes information, I'm going to show you a little video. And I need you all to do the sound for me, because the sound is important. Oh, sorry, we'll go back. One push. Nope. Sorry. Okay, we'll go back to that. One more. There's an intercontinental. Okay, so just watch this video.
Many of you feel bad for this lamp. That is because you're crazy. It has no feelings, and the new one is much better.
Okay, I mean, one of the greatest commercials of all time. I don't know if anybody felt bad for the lamp. I've seen this thousands of times. I always feel bad for the lamp. Why do we feel bad for the lamp? Yes, it's raining and it's sad music, but there's a key thing that the director did, which was to shoot scenes from the perspective of the lamp, when the lamp is being taken away from his home, right? And then when the lamp is on the street, kind of looking up at his old home, you know, he's sitting out there in the rain and he sees the new lamp there, right? So this is really powerful. It engages the social brain network. This was made by the famous Hollywood director, Spike Jonze, who directed Being John Malkovich. So he really knew what he was doing. This is the power of perspective taking, and it can humanize inanimate objects, right? So, you know, Disney and, you know, has made tons and tons, gazillions of dollars on getting you to feel things for, you know, teacups and forks and spoons. I mean, really quite amazing. Now, the part of the brain that the social brain network that is engaged when we take perspective is this upper part that I talked about earlier, right? And there's a key part of this, don't worry about what it really means, but TPJ, it's kind of right here. And the work of my good friend and colleague, Emily Falk here at Penn has shown that people who are naturally persuasive, who are good at selling their ideas and whose ideas catch on and go viral, for example, online, they're naturally persuasive and they're more likely to take the perspective of others, and they engage this TPJ, this social brain network, more strongly than people who do not, right? So this is the salesperson effect. That tells us that taking perspective is really important and useful in various aspects of business. Unfortunately, there's some things that get in the way of perspective taking, and one of the most important is power. And this is a fun little test. Sorry, I can go back to that. This is a fun little test developed by Adam Galinsky and Marie Schweitzer. And it's just real quick. You snap your fingers 3 times, write the letter E on your forehead. And it turns out that people who have either been primed to think about being powerful, or people who are powerful, you know, who are higher up in the hierarchy, they write the letter E so they can read it. Okay, and people who are lower on the totem pole or who are primed to think about being less powerful, write the letter E so that other people can read it from another person's perspective. Okay, and this is entirely consistent with a number of studies which have shown that the social brain network, activity within the social brain network, sorry, this is lagging. Activity within the social brain network goes down the higher up you think you are in the world. If your social status is higher, you tend to have lower social brain network activity. If you are objectively tend to be a leader, we often see that social brain network activity is lower. Think about the boss, the worst boss you ever had, who walks into the office and doesn't talk to the staff, doesn't talk to the cleaning person. Not only is that bad manners, but it also means that they are losing out on the opportunity to learn some information, to build connections, and to build a workplace culture of trust and connection. And this is so deeply baked in. We've seen this in monkeys too. So higher ranking monkeys don't take the perspective of lower ranking monkeys. So what can you do about that? Well, if you are in a situation that is really hierarchical, what you can do is to try to flatten the hierarchy, or at least remove physical cues that communicate hierarchy really, really strongly. So in the United States, medical doctors, for example, the length of their white coat indicates how high up they are in the hierarchy. So the longer the white coat, the higher up you are. And so the first year interns and residents have very short white coats, and they're often not listened to, right? And unfortunately, that can lead to bad clinical outcomes. So the Johns Hopkins Medical School, a number of years ago, recognizing this, implemented a change so that everybody had the same white coat, right? They all had the same length white coat. They haven't published what the outcomes were, but thought that was a really intriguing move to try to kind of flatten the hierarchy. Now, those are the things that can get in the way of perspective taking. It turns out, just like getting your social brain on the treadmill by talking to people is important to strengthening it, you can actually train perspective taking. And this is what I put up here is a tool that you can access. It's free on Wharton's website. And it's really just a sort of very brief exercise that you engage in. You can engage in, once a day. It takes less than 5 minutes. And basically what you do is you imagine a situation that you've had in the past week, some interaction you had with somebody, and you think about it from your perspective and write down 3 or 4 things, and you think about it from the other person's perspective. When you do that, you actually cause that part of the social brain network to grow. And when it grows, it actually does its job better. So I'm seeing that we're a little bit behind on time. So I think that what we can do is skip the next section and go to the key takeaways. And then I think in the Q&A, we'll be able to cover some of the things that are there. So I don't know if anybody can advance the slides to the key takeaways. Or I can just advance them. I can just give you a preview really fast. Okay, look at that. So that's all about getting in sync with people. And I do want to show that we've been doing a lot of work with companies measuring brain activity in the field, and people are actually at work. You can access this piece, which we published online last September, which showed like what our brain activity reveals about improving workplace culture. And this is from a study we did with a company called Slalom. So I'll go to the key takeaways now. And what I want you to take home is that exercise the social brain to grow your social skills. It's pretty easy to do. Just get out and talk to people. Pay attention to other people to get the most out of a meeting. Focusing on shared values and goals can reduce bias and increase empathy. You can exercise perspective taking. If you do so, you'll make better decisions, be more persuasive, and be more creative. Something we didn't get to talk about, which is to get in sync with others, and that can come up in Q&A to boost team chemistry, higher performance, and greater well-being will follow. And if you're interested in this stuff, you can check out my book, The Leader's Brain, which explores lots and lots of different areas, including these. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere else. So thanks for listening, and we're really excited to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Michael. Let me take over control. Also, if you want to know more, it's a super cutting edge topic, obviously. So there are a lot of courses. Michael and I will both be part of a summer executive course held in July this year in Monaco with a bunch of amazing other speakers, such as Paul Glimcher from NYU, Molly Crockett from Princeton, and Joseph Cable also from UPenn. So we got an amazing number of questions. I will, I guess, just have one warm-up question for you and then hold on to some of my other questions. So what I really liked, so in the beginning, you started with this idea of that there is a social brain, and the number of friends that I have will increase the social brain. And so what I was wondering about is, so how does social media, so virtual friends kick in versus real friends, right? So are these real friends or are these social media friends? And I'm asking this question, so I have also some work on like the downside of social media use, how this can be bad for mental health and can be as if addictive even, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think that in the earliest days of social media, like when Facebook first came out, there was a relationship between the size of parts of the social brain network and how many Facebook friends you had. We know now that like your Facebook friends, your social media friends, your connections are not a reflection of kind of real deep connections that you have, in the world. These are not people who are going to come over and lend you their lawnmower or support you if you've, lost your home or something like that in a flood, right? So I think that our brains somehow know the difference, first of all. Second, the data to me is extremely clear that social media is not a healthy thing in general. It is highly addictive. The algorithms are designed by the smartest people on the planet to hijack the reinforcement learning systems of our brain and the fact that social feedback itself is reinforcing. And the problem there is that we're so interested in other people. We're so by design, right? And we are sensitive to status differences, right? And so that in particular, I think for young people to see that other people are having a better time, or they've got more stuff, or they're skinnier than you, right? This sort of FOMO kind of thing is really, really unhealthy. And it's really, really, I think, really, really bad for our brains, especially young people. So yeah, it's a fascinating why there's a difference or how our brains know that, but our brains do.
It's super fascinating. Yeah, because so, I mean, what we looked at was, so people, what's interesting is, so when people receive less likes, so which is a bit of like a reaction as compared to the average likes, right? So they actually they start to post faster and more afterwards, right? So, and this is against kind of reinforcement learning idea, right? Because you should stop posting, right? You should say, I'm done with this. And what we find is, so then we, came up with this model where we say, look, this is really about strategic status management, right? Which has all these implications that you mentioned. It's cool.
Yeah, no, that's really important work.
Okay, we can go back to these later. So there were a bunch of questions that were submitted online before we go to the questions that were submitted now in real time. A lot of them we actually already covered during your presentation. One that I would like to ask you is the first one. So what about organizational culture? Because we know it plays a major role in individual behavior. What tips and tools can you suggest to map this culture and how it influences decision-making, specifically in the sense of change management in organizations?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there in this question. I talked a little bit about this in here, right, in this session, which is to build a culture that provides time and space for people to actually talk to each other. I think that being completely remote, although it's, people like it because it's, you don't have to commute, it's more flexible, you don't have to put, pants on or anything, you can wear your pajamas, but that raises lots of real challenges, right? It's harder to get into the culture. It's really hard for young people to get mentored, to form connections with teams. And this also creates silos, right? Where information from one side of the organization is bumping up against the walls of a silo. We saw that during the sort of move to remote work at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and innovation actually plummeted. I think that was as a result of the kind of difficulties that these kind of online interactions present for the flow of ideas. And there was a study that came out last fall that looked at, I don't know, tens of millions of papers and patent applications since the 1960s. And it showed that innovation falls off steeply as a function of distance. And the most innovative things happen if you're in the same room or same floor. Even if you're on different floors in a building, that already gets in the way. And if somebody's on the other side of the planet, that makes it really hard to innovate. It's great for execution and turning ideas into products, but it's not great for innovation. So I could go on and on and on. I think that's all on the kind of culture and connection, trust and communication. There are a lot of exercises. I think they'll all have access to these slides, which I described some of these exercises. We have a lot on Wharton Online. The other part of this, and it gets to another question here, which is, I think, and we're doing a lot of work on this too, the flip side of trying to go beyond self-report to understand who a person is, right? What makes them tick, right? What are their intrinsic talents, strengths, and motivators, right? And the standard approach to doing that, to understanding that, to measuring it, is with a personality test like the Myers-Briggs test, which has no basis in science at all, right? And an interview, which for people who are neurodiverse can be a disaster, right? And so what we've been developing is tools to measure directly, not necessarily from the brain, but from behavioral assessments that interrogate specific circuits in the brain, such as the one that goes from focus to creativity, or from being really social to being very solitary, right? Or being really risk averse to being really risk seeking. So we know where those live in the brain, and we know ways to kind of tease that out or unmask that without asking people to self-report. Because when you self-report, you either say who you think you are, but you might not know, or you're trying to fit what somebody's looking for. right? You're biased by who's asking and in what way. So I think that those two combined, right? Creating a good organizational culture, doing a better job of talent assessment and training, and then doing that for teams too. And that's one of the big ones we're working on with Deloitte right now. Not only how do we do a more precise job of figuring out who you are, but how do I figure out who you're going to work well with, right? And how do I optimally compose a team, right, that has all of the characteristics that can innovate, but that can actually execute, right? So I think that those are a couple of points for HR management.
Yeah, and so Deloitte has this neuroscience, I guess, division even, right? So do a lot of other consultancies or companies in that space. There's one that I actually like that does something similar. You might have heard about them. It's called Pymetrics. And they do something very similar than what you just described to these tools, where they so they help people not to, I mean, for recruiting, right? It's a HR tool. But it helps to figure out the soft skills side, also using kind of the tasks that we use in neuroscience and psychology. That also really gets rid of, gender bias in recruiting, which is super fun. So Pymetrics is the CEO is always coming as a guest speaker to my class on how we can leverage neuroscience for business. It's a fun tool that everyone can actually use. So I shared this with our MBAs and they seem to like it. It's a very long thing though, but
what we're doing is I know Pymetrics very well. A good friend used to be their chief science officer, but we've got really brief behavioral assessments, so little games, and you can take the whole suite of games in less than 10 minutes. And you have an AI tool that generates a report like, this is all your strengths, your weaknesses, this is what you'd be a good fit for. Anyway, so yeah, I'd love to share notes on that. Very cool.
Yeah, and so I mean, also, so what this means for you guys that are interested in more, so there are a couple of resources on the Wharton Knowledge, and interesting, our internal knowledge website is also called Knowledge, so there's also INSEAD Knowledge that has a bunch of articles on this. We can share them maybe in the YouTube channel as further readings with you guys. Okay, cool. Let's maybe go to another question on like culture and teamwork. The before last one. So how to optimize a team member's logical thinking to be wiser in capturing holistic situations as possible reactions from external parties on our team member action communication. So the question is, how can we use this actually to motivate teams to improve, to do better and get out of their comfort zone? And that's a question I also get super often when I teach.
I mean, this is a great question. And again, I do want to point out that, like, I can tell you, this is what the science says, and this is how it works in the lab. What we've been doing and focusing on over the last 5-6 years is field testing a lot of these exercises, interventions, et cetera, to show that they can work in the field, in the office, whatever, and they deliver returns. So for example, that we've worked with, which capitalizes on this pay attention, listen, be vulnerable and authentic. And it relies on this exercise that was developed like 15 years ago at UCLA by, forgetting the name. But anyway, so it's called Fast Friends, and it's a series of cards. There's 3 decks of cards, and they start with very benign kind of dull questions, and they move to ones that are much deeper. It was designed to make people closer psychologically. So it takes the process, a 6-month process of becoming friends with somebody, and compresses it into less than an hour. We've used it all over the world. What it does when you have that kind of conversation, it synchronizes your brain activity. So you can take 2 people who don't know each other and who are very different. And as through that conversation, their brains literally get in sync. And we know that people who are more in sync cooperate more, they trust each other more, they like each other more, they're willing to work hard on the other person's behalf. We've shown this has a big impact in sports, for example. Other people have shown it happens for the office. So during the pandemic, one of the things we did is we worked with this women's artisan cooperative in South America. So these are all women artisans living in small villages throughout the Andes highlands. And then there was a sort of management team that they're based in New York, and it's called Matriarcha. And so they make these beautiful bags and ponchos and things. And there's a lot of mistrust between the different villages, the women in different villages. and a lot of mistrust for management. And so this was getting in the way of them, commerce, really. So through online work with our students, we implemented these exercises for the women artisans to interact with management. Okay, so they did this, and universally, this increased trust, communication got better, everybody got happier, and the outcome was that within 6 months, the cooperative was actually given over to the artisans themselves. So they own it now. I think that's a pretty good outcome, I mean, personally. So, I can't give you productivity numbers, but basically everything improved. And we've implemented that in a number of situations. And you can even use it as just each card as an icebreaker at a team meeting. And you kind of go around the room and everybody kind of answers that question. There's commercially available versions online. And it's great if you have teenagers. So there's like one called Actually Curious, Actually Curious. And there's another one from Dan Ariely's group called, No Small Talk. And if you leave them on the dinner table, pick them up, and then they start asking each other these questions, and it's really fun. And it's like it takes them away from their phone, and they actually focus on each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like the topic of empathy is of super interest to our audience here. There are a bunch of questions. So Kerstin Press asked, what about gender? Did actually also gender matter in the empathy response, similar to the race?
Whether you're seeing somebody of a different gender. It's an interesting question. I'm not aware of kind of unconscious or implicit bias of that sort, although we see that there is certainly bias out there. Curiously, and this is interesting, we just finished collecting data for a study that we've been trying to launch for a while. And this is looking at brain activity in entrepreneurs who are pitching their ideas to investors. And in the United States, only 2% of investment capital goes to women and minority-owned businesses. Okay, so something's getting in the way, right? And what is it? Is it the approach? Is it implicit bias? We don't know. Do we need to implement some way to get the entrepreneurs in sync with the investors, right? That's different. I don't have we have the data, we haven't analyzed it yet. So check back in, and we hope to be able to tell you soon.
There seems to be a low-hanging fruit for an interesting research study. And there's two questions that are related to that. One is from Ernest Minconta, who asked, how can we actually unlearn these unconscious biases that are shaped by the environment we grow up so that we can treat people more equally? And then from Kriti Ranchad, are these actually the empathy regions in the brain? Can they be different for different people, or are these always the same regions?
Well, the empathy areas are basically all the same. There is another question I saw up here is like, how different is this across people? And what I'll tell you is that like, this is how the average brain works, right? And then you have people, some people are below average in one function and above average in another. Those individual differences are really kind of grist for the mill, right? So that's something that we understand actually quite a bit about. How do you unlearn biases? The same way you learn biases. So it's like you have to put yourself in that situation, repeat it. Like, so if I go to the farmer's market and I, deliberately have conversations with people who are very different from me, right? This begins to turn the dials in your brain to change through plasticity, open up, for example, in the case of empathy, your brain to who is a person, right? Who is a person in my tribe? Right. And then once you've done that, I think a lot of that is through attention, what you pay attention to, who you pay attention to, then you get richer data and you come to understand them. So that's, I think, what we have to do. That's the long-term approach. And then there are these exercises which can just strengthen your ability to kind of take perspective. There's work by like Tanya Singer and by Emily Falk, that various kinds of like loving kindness meditation, or meditating on other people's experience, repeating the mantra, they're a person just like me who has had pain and suffering in their life. This kind of opens up your brain, if you will, to including their perspective and their experiences and feeling empathy. I know I didn't answer the question earlier about change, organizational change and change management, but everything we've talked about is really critical there too. So, you know, organizational change is super stressful, right? People bring it home with them. It impacts their bodies, their well-being, their brains. It's not good. And I think the key to creating a situation that can thrive through such change is creating a culture of social support, right? So when people feel connected to each other and connected to the company, they're going to be able to weather that storm much better.
Well, I think we have to wrap it up. There are lots of more questions. We can answer them maybe also in response to the YouTube channel video.
Feel free to email me if you're interested, if you want to engage more. I'm happy to do that.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. Also, I mean, feel free to reach out to me. I'm now handing over again to our lifelong learning team, I think, right? So there, we didn't get to the last slide, who's going to present this. But I can also present this, right? So we have a bunch of other fun webinars coming up on AI. There was one question also that we'll not get to, whether this is similar to virtual humans, all the empathy. So you have to stay tuned for watching this on the YouTube channel to get an answer to that by Yoon-hee. And yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for doing this. This was super interesting. We had so many people participating, way too many questions. And we should do this again. Thank you so much.
Do it again. Well, it was wonderful to be here. Thanks, everybody.
And thanks to everyone in the background for organizing this, for our lifelong learning team. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.